Welcome back to Season 2 of Illuminating Leadership. This season, we'll explore how leaders and employees can best navigate the new workplace, with specific emphasis on how culture impacts engagement. I'm your host and leadership development coach, Beth Johnson, and I'm so glad you're here. If you like what you hear today, head over to patreon.com at Illuminating Leadership. Remember, that's Lumen with an E. And subscribe for exclusive coaching benefits and rewards that you won't find on my other platforms. Things like live Q&As, ad-free content, monthly group coaching, and much more. I hope to see you there. And now, on with the show. I'm here today with my guest from San Diego, California, Dr. Ravi Rajaratnam, owner of Breakthrough Awakened. Now, Dr. Ravi primarily serves as an executive and leadership advisor, coach, and trainer. And he helps individuals to achieve sustained breakthrough through performance without burnout. Doesn't that sound lovely? He's also actively involved in community service. He focuses on helping the homeless, mentoring special forces veterans into their second career, and supports youth education and well-being in rural areas, both here in the States and internationally. Dr. Ravi, it is an honor to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, Beth. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right to it because we have a lot to discuss today.
Okay.
Why don't you, if you would, share a brief statement with us about where you kind of started your career and the path that brought you where you are today?
Sure. I started off my career as a technologist. I majored in computer science as a software engineer. And then 3 years into my career, I became a manager. I was a high-flying manager, achieving everything that needed to be done. Customers were happy. And my manager casually told me, Ravi, why don't you go ahead and do a 360-degree feedback? And I had no idea what that was. Now I know what it is. But basically getting, feedback from your peers, your direct reports, your uplines, and everyone else. And the moment the results came back, I was shocked. The results were like I was basically a ruthless driver with total disregard for individuals or what was going on in their life. So from that point onwards, I started investing into being a better person, better manager, better leader, got into emotional intelligence and all kinds of different things that I made it my mission to like, you know what, this is how I'm going to behave. And this is how I want to make sure that everyone who is a people manager also manage and lead others.
That was the greatest gift your manager could have given you, wasn't it?
Oh my God, it was amazing. And I had no clue what I was walking into because I thought, oh yeah, there'll be big glowing remarks, only to find out it was brutal.
I could say, and my listeners know from previous podcasts, I've had a similar experience. And did you find it, quite humbling? But you also had to have had the mental makeup already yourself to be open to what you heard and be willing to push through any fear or any, feelings you might have about how you were just assessed in order to make yourself better, to get personal and professional growth. What do you think? How were you ready for that?
My parents always taught me to be vulnerable, right? And not to be, what you might call it, sugarcoat things. Mm-hmm. So first step I did was, okay, now that I got the feedback, it has to be true because perception is reality, right? And I started the feedback. And the first thing I did is I went and apologized to everyone who gave me that feedback, even though it was anonymous. Like there was some good, but there was a lot of brutal. So went and getting the feedback, say, I'm open to this. Thank you for giving me that honest feedback. And I'm going to make a change. So.
That's phenomenal. I love hearing stories like that because I know what the results can be. And I know how much happier you and your team can be, once you put those things in place. You said something right there that is so oxymoron for me, which was vulnerable and I don't sugarcoat. And I think a lot of leaders feel that not sugarcoating means being direct and putting it right in your face. And that means I can't be vulnerable. I'm the leader. You need to follow me, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you blend a vulnerable and a very direct approach?
Everything that I teach, all the managers and leaders that I coach is making sure you are transparent, right? Transparency is important. But at the same time, common sense still apply, right? So there are certain things that they need to know, but there are certain things that they need to know, and you better back it up why we're doing what we're doing, right? If you don't give them the context, then it's going to be dangerous because they can interpret it a different way. So always start from a place of transparency and say, I got your back, and also explain to them, why are we doing this as an organization, as a corporation, as a leadership team? They'll have a better appreciation rather than just saying, this is the law, this is how we're going to do it,
Yeah, which never works very well, does it? So I heard in that transparency, which I know coming up in corporate, was told is not a good thing because you can't let the front line know what's going on. My gosh, that's company secret. So what will they do with it? Which is utter BS. But you've got transparency, you've got the why, right?
Mhm.
Why do I have this big vision? You've got the why for the people. How can you bring them into your vision? And what is their why? What do they gain from it? What's their part in it? And then I heard you say support.
Exactly. Always understanding what's in it for them and telling them, I have your back. I have your back because I'm going through the same thing as well, right? So as long as they know that you have their back, they will embrace the change, because change is the only constant, but nobody likes change. So
That
letting
is
them
interesting. And that's and I don't know about you, but I'm that way as well. I mean, change is difficult, but if we don't navigate it and we don't push through it and we don't overcome those fears and push through them, right? It makes
That
that
is
change
correct.
all the more difficult.
Yep, I agree.
Well, you mentioned in your bio that you sent me, and I'm going to quote here if that's okay. The importance of understanding our cognitive wiring prior to embarking on a personal or professional development journey. So, how does that philosophy and priority for you impact your work and the work like we were just talking about with leaders, executives, and even the youth, and even into your volunteer work and helping the homeless?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because as I was working with all the leaders and the executive to understand what are their blockers or what's limiting them from getting to the next level, and as I peeled the onion, it always led back to their early childhood, whether it was broken family, a trauma, lack of a role model, you name it. So I started investigating into, okay, what causes that belief system, right? And when is the belief system actually anchored in them? And that's when I discovered it was 0 to 5. That's when the belief systems are nurtured into them. So before we start the rewiring process, let's understand how you're cognitively wired, meaning anybody can be a manager, a leader when things are good. A true manager, a leader appears when the crap has hit the fan.
That's right.
Right? And normally it's ugly. Why? Because we have not identified the root level problem of the root cause. So that's what I do in terms of making sure that we regress back a little bit to your early childhood, or when the belief systems were formed, understand how you are cognitively wired. Now that we know that, and most of the time it starts with empathy, forgive yourself, right? It's not your fault. And then how can we start the recovery process in terms of building new neural pathways that becomes part of your habit? And typically it takes 66 days to form a habit, average. It could be shorter, it could be longer for different individuals. And that's the process that I use. So a lot of what I do with my clients is coaching, of course. There's a little bit of a therapy because I'm getting them back to the root level, and a lot of mentoring as well, because I have been an individual contributor. I went through the ranks up to become a C-suite, and I can show you how to get there, navigate the people management part, the empathy part, and things like that. So I do the combination of all that.
So, Dr. Ravi, how do you work with, or what advice would you have for leaders who say, whoa, that's a lot of vulnerability? I wanted you to teach me how to get my team in line. And now you're asking me to go back when I was 5 years old and remember what happened then. And I've worked very hard to put some of that shit away, right? How do you work them through that and help them understand this is real, right? It has a real impact on everything we do today.
Yeah, great question. Leadership, before you can be a great leader, it starts with self-leadership, right? You need to be in your best form before you can tell others to lead you, being a visionary or whatever, right? So if you don't know what your blind spot, if you're not self-leading yourself, guess what? You're not being a good manager or leader. So I'll do simple things like, let me just attend your next staff meeting. Let me be a fly on the wall. And I'll just observe the staff meeting. And after that, I'll have a debrief with them. I'll do simple things like, hey, did you see the energy change the moment you walked in? Were you the first person to speak or the last person to speak? Was it more of a collaborative meeting or was it more command and control? It's like, oh my God, because we all have blind spots. Unless somebody comes in from the outside in to highlight that, people keep operating that way. So I do that, and I also sometimes use the assessment that they get too, like 360 feedback or whatever.
Mhm.
This is the evidence. You might think you're high and mighty, but guess what? The evidence says otherwise. So I'm here to help you, and I'm not just going to give you another framework to manage your team. I'm going to make sure that you are best version of yourself, and that best version is sustainable. And how we do that is going back all the way to how you are cognitively wired. Do you want to play? If you don't want to, that's fine. I'll move on.
I love that question because it does take a willingness, doesn't it? It takes somebody who says, they may say, whoa, Dr. Ravi, I do not like what I just heard there, and I'm pretty sure I don't agree with it, but I need to know more, and I'm open to knowing more because I want to be the best leader and the best version of myself.
Exactly.
Right.
And the other thing, the addition to that is I just don't look at the professional development part as well. I also tell them what's going on the home front, on the personal development side, right? Because it's important I attack it in a whole person manner, right? Because sometimes what goes on in the home front bleeds into the work front and vice versa. So whenever I set the goals for them too, it's make sure it's holistic. There are professional goals and there are personal goals. And I hate the term work-life balance because there's no such thing as work-life balance. Who are we kidding? By the time we add in the commute time and the number of hours and things like that, there's no balance, right?
There's no balance.
So I choose the word work-life harmony, right? There are some times that if you do overtime at work, there are some times you have to do overtime at home front, right? You just need to figure out the harmony and make sure that you treat your employees that way as well, right? Because if they're all independently wealthy, they won't be working here, right? But you got to make sure you also treat them as an adult, give them the right responsibility, and trust them that they can do the task. Of course, trust but verify kind of thing,
Exactly.
So that's how I operate.
I really like the work-life harmony. I think that gives so many of us, especially in my generation, our generation, permission, right? We've been after the elusive work-life balance and then feeling like a failure when we can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely right. Sometimes you're needed at home far more than you're needed at work and vice versa. And I also like what you said. What I heard in my head was gone are the days of don't bring your home to work, right? Because I've known for years, but never really understood how to put it into words until, the last couple of years. We are human, and human means we have lives outside of work and at work, and we take our work home and we bring our lives into work. They are all connected, right?
Yeah.
How important is that for a leader to remember that and value that and honor that in the employees that they lead?
Every leader that I talk to, I always start with empathy or the love part, right? You need to be an empathetic leader. That doesn't mean that you let them take advantage of you, but you need to be sensitive about what else is going on in their life, right? And you need to make sure that you inspire them to be the best version, and you also be the best role model as well, right? Because sometimes I say motivation is overrated because you can always drag a horse to a water, but you can't force it to drink it.
Right.
So it's more so understanding what makes them tick, what inspires them. Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it because you're retiring, you want to retire mom and dad, or you want to buy another house or whatever? So connecting the dots down there, it's like, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing, right? And throughout the way, throw some motivational sprinkles here and there, right? So it's important that you start with empathy, especially during COVID, right?
Oh,
Making
yeah.
sure you have the time out. How's it going? And we used to have, virtual happy hours, just not talking about work, just what's going on, how the things do, how's the family, how you doing in terms of your mental fitness and things like that. So I think it's important.
The shift in the room and the shift in the person is incredible and indescribable when you as a leader deploy that and you watch your people lean in and want to follow you and want to connect with you. And again, there's another old belief dispelled that empathy means people will take advantage of me. It does
Yeah.
not, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to set the boundaries, right? I'm still your boss.
Correct. Yep.
Right. Just because I'm a nice guy, it doesn't mean that, you can be delayed in this, the quality's not going to be good. You set the boundaries. Yeah.
Well, and you're right, because I've worked with leaders myself, and I'm sure you have as well, that get a little too close to the employee, wanting to deploy the empathy, and then all of a sudden they've let a friend in and don't know how to correct that situation. I mean, have you ever worked with someone that's dealt with that? They've gotten too close to the employee and now they need to find their way out of that, yet still maintain a productive relationship.
All the time, and it never works out.
I love working with you, and I love your directness. It doesn't, does it?
It does not work out because that's their blind spot as well. Sometimes, it's like the pleaser in them, right? Because
Yes.
he's my friend. I know I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt myself, the relationship and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So you can do something fun with them outside of work, but in corporate, this is what how it's meant to be,
So once again, balance and harmony is what I'm hearing in everything,
exactly.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So with all that we've just discussed, how does that apply to the youth that you work with and preparing them for, oh my gosh, not just leadership, but adulthood and transitioning them from school to the real world?
Yeah. Youth nowadays need strong role models because I'm sorry to say, I see the role models out there, they're not really that great, especially when I look at all the so-called role models out there. So the start is with the youth is listening, right? Having good listening skills. And I always kid with my kids as well. It's like there's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and one mouth, right?
That's right.
Seek first to understand before being understood, the famous Stephen Covey code, right? So I always go in with, I want to listen to you. Tell me what's going on in your life. What are your aspirations and who's your role model? What gives you your satisfaction when you're doing something? Because everybody has a certain passion, and we just need to figure out that we give them the right tools to make sure they're able to pursue their passion. Again, common sense still apply, right? You need to make sure that you're doing something that you could also be sustainable and that you can make a living. And one model that I use is called the Ikigai model. It's a Japanese philosophy. And it has like 3 different things it's talked about. Do what you love, do what you're good at, do what you can get paid for, and do what the world needs. There are 4 different quadrants, and the intersection of that is Ikigai, the sweet spot. So if you do what you love, and if you do what the world needs, you get the passion and doing something that's bigger than yourself, and at the same time doing what you can get paid for. So kind of putting all that together, the Ikigai model is something that I follow personally, and I start with that when I'm working with the youth, and that normally gets an aha moment. It's like, oh yeah, great. And sometimes you have to kind of guide them through the guardrails, right? Yeah, you like doing this. I want to be a YouTuber, great, but how many YouTubers are multi-millionaires or whatever? How can we turn that passion into something that is also benefiting society, and at the same time you can get paid for? So always trying to use that balance.
Well, I love that. Oh, I know that I've heard that, but it was years and years ago. So thank you for that reminder. I especially for our creative types, the ones who are just so good at I'll call it the arts and entertainment and performance, who are brilliant, but they struggle because they've been raised to say, you have to go get the money first. Let's go to school. You've got to get the money, and then you can pursue your passion. And this model, what I heard you say is, that's not necessarily the case, but you do blend the 4, and then you will find what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
beautiful. Um, you mentioned listening, and I know, or at least I feel like adults don't even feel like they're heard anymore, right? Everybody's just out there, blah, saying their stuff. But do we really feel heard? And what do you get from the kids? What are they saying? The Gen Z, the alphas, the early millennials who are just, they've got a drive and a desire in them I haven't seen in a number of years. What are you seeing in them? What's their response to being listened to, being heard?
Yeah, I think they get a bum rap, especially they like the millennials, they call the snowflakes and things like that. But they're no different than the boomers. They're driven as well. You just need to figure out what their passion is. And as long as they know that you're hearing them and you're there to help them rather than judge them, that's where you win the game. So, but we go in that this is the way it needs to be. This is what we did. This is how it's like, no, things have changed. And I'll take you a great example, the school system, right? How are we teaching our kids?
Yeah.
Through rote memorization and providing, questions to known answers. That's not real life, right? How are we preparing them? So, of course, they're going to be frustrated because now, why should I be listening to a teacher or lecturer when I can get all that information in my iPhone, right? So you're not teaching me, you're not equipping me how to advance even further and making me be a slave to technology or being, just doing the same thing that we've been doing so many years. So adapting is important, right? As an adult, you need to make sure you adapt to the different styles and eventually they'll find their way. But again, it starts with common sense, right? And listening and empathy and all of the other things that I talked about. As long as they know that you care, that's when they open up. But if you go into the situation as though you're judging and you know it all, guess what? You're fighting fire with fire.
Right. The we've always done it that way never worked, and it especially is not working with this young group. What do you think, in your opinion, what could we do differently in our school systems to better equip these kids?
There are some schools that are already doing the flip model, where basically they have like a case study. You're supposed to study that first and then come up with how you solve a problem. And then you're coming into the room and sharing the answers, your solutions, and say, hey, are there anything else? Because the wisdom is in the collective.
Yes.
So everybody came up with their own different answers, like, oh my God, I did not think about it this way. And you are expanding your solution, your problem solving skills and different way of looking at things. That's what I would, encourage. And rather than just say, hey, go study this, and then I'm going to be testing you on this, and this is the right answer.
And you're going to fail if you don't get it right.
Exactly.
Period. There's no if, ands, or buts.
Exactly. And am I equipping them to use that in real life? No, right? It's just, how many times, when was the last time you've used something from a Pythagoras theorem or, calculus, unless you're an engineer or something like that,
Exactly.
right? You don't, but we force them to do that, right? So we need to adapt.
Well, and what you just described applies to real life. It applies to anyone who wants to go into leadership. It teaches them the listening, the empathy, collaboration. My way is not always the right way, right? Open-mindedness, big picture thinking.
Yeah.
Well, you recently wrote a book, and I'm going to mention the name of it here at the end of the podcast, but I wanted to ask you, it's about, again, the importance and long-term impact of that cognitive rewiring or wiring from our
Cognitive
childhood.
wiring.
The cognitive wiring,
yeah.
of course. So what does that mean? Can you really break that down into layman's terms for everyone? And what most surprised you during your research for that book?
Okay. So when I found out that majority of the belief systems are formed during early childhood, I started going into what are the early childhood development skills. And besides the motor skills, there are three different things, which is cognitive, language and communication, and social and emotional. So those are three different skills. And, social and emotional, basically how you interact with others, language and communication, which is all the, same thing, interaction, things like that. And also the cognitive is like the thinking process and how you're thinking and how you're problem solving and all that, right? And as I was doing the research on that, I found out there was a direct link to also the 21st century skills, which are cognitive intrapersonal skills and interpersonal skills. So that's when I got really excited. And that's, it's amazing how everything lines up, because I did the book as an instruction manual for parents. Because
I
as a
didn't
parent,
realize that. Okay.
yeah, because as a parent, you don't have an instruction manual. We try to do our best based on how we were raised and how we were raised by our grandparents, things like that. So I did that specifically after I saw the United Nations statistic that 250 million children under the age of 5 globally are developmentally delayed.
Let's say that number again.
250 million children globally are developmentally delayed under the age of 5.
Wow.
Of course, a lot of that is also to do with nutrition, right? But all the other early childhood development skills are also delayed. And that shocked me. And this was pre-COVID numbers, right? And guess what? Majority of them probably going to be ending up being my client, but that's not the point, right?
Right.
I want to make sure that you do parenting right, right? So I did all this different research, and there's also a portion in the book where I look at the different brain development areas, different parts of the brain when they develop, and how are they sensitive to the cognitive side, the language and communication, and social and emotional, and put together some bite-sized strategies for parents to use it in their day-to-day interactions with their kids, whether they're bathing them, feeding them, and things like that. And if I were to ask you a question, what do you think is the best toy a parent can give a child? What would you say that is?
The best toy?
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow. I really have my mind goes to so many different things. There's so much available to them. I don't know.
Yeah, that's our problem, right? The best toy a parent can give the child is themselves.
Oh, that's so good. That's really good.
Right,
Yeah.
because age 0 to 5 is when you have all this millions and billions of neurons in your brain waiting to get hooked up by language, by touch, smell, emotion, all of that, right? And they're observing even the bad words that you say, right? They got it from mom and dad, right? So they're observing. So what can you do to enrich the language and communication? How are you interacting with others? Are you being conscientious when you're talking to others? Are you saying yes and thank you and please and things like that, right? Are you paying attention to the child when you're talking to that person? Or are you multitasking? Are you looking at your phone while you're talking to your child, right? Simple things like that. That's important. So I incorporate all these different bite-sized strategies, just like use them, and then I had all the science behind it to say I didn't cook this up. This is proven, right? And making sure that they can be the best versions of themselves.
Can they find some of those bite-sized morsels in the book as well?
Yes, they're all in the book, along with my website as well, has all the resources that I've used as well.
Beautiful.
So they can look at that if they want to go geek out in there. But I made it sure that it's really simple and things that you don't have to go out of your way. While you're feeding your child, what can you do? While you're bathing your child, what can you do? Even talking out loud, and how that is going to impact their language and communication, how this is going to impact the social and emotional, and just giving them little strategies, right? Because when I was growing up, I used to see other parents talking about, it's like, you can't cry, be a man, and, things like that, right? But instead of going, it's like, it's okay to be sad or mad, angry. Let's understand that emotion rather than suppressing them. And let's see why we're feeling that way. And what do we need to do to get over it? Right.
And we did that, didn't we? That our emotions were suppressed and labeled and judged.
Exactly.
And I mean, what would you say to someone about that today? Is an emotion, you just said, no, don't suppress it. Do we today still label and judge emotions in boys and girls too much?
Absolutely. You see that all the time. You go to the mall, you go out and things like that, right? And what is the worst thing they can say? Mom and Dad, we're going to leave you here if you don't stop crying. In the mall.
Yes.
That fear. It's like, oh my God, the trauma the child is going to have, right? And that's another interesting part that I talk about in the book as well, because as a human being, you are wired two different ways. One way is the fight, flight, or freeze, and the other way is to grow, right? And when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, like as a manager, a leader, or a team member, if they're in a heated argument, what are they trying to do? They're trying to win that conversation, or they're trying to get out of that conversation, or they might freeze, right? But when they're doing that, they are in a reactive mode, and they're shutting down the growth part, which is all the creativity, right? So one of the things that I equip my leaders as well as I coach, how can we close down the reactivity or mellow down the reactivity and be more creative? Because guess what? The solution, even if you came up with a solution from the reactive mode, it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be ideal, right? One of my favorite quote is from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He talks about between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space lies the power of your response. And in that response is your growth and freedom. How beautiful is that, right?
I was thinking so beautiful and so wise and important to understand where he came from and
Exactly.
pursued his own growth and learned that. What if we've got people listening that are like, I'm too old to learn. I was never taught the right way. I still don't believe that, to embrace the creativity and embrace empathy and all these things are really going to make a change for people. Is there, one governing philosophy or thought that you would share with them that is pretty impactful?
Yeah, even though they missed the boat, 0 to 5 is the prime time, right, for the neuroplasticity. You can still teach an old dog a new trick, right? And go into like incremental change. Let's try this, right? And do it for a certain number of days and see what the reward is, right? Whether it's interacting with your child that's always been rebellious with you or whatever. Just bite-sized strategies. Try it. Try this. Try what works and things like that. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Just little things, and then incremental, celebrate that success, and then just improve it 1%, 1%, 1%. And eventually they'll believe and they'll see the results and they'll embrace it more. And it's like, okay, I can do it, So,
I think that's great advice for everyone because we all struggle with, I've got this big picture view and I know how I want to accomplish it. I've got this massive goal. And if I take that one little incremental step today, I'm lazy. I didn't do enough. There wasn't enough effort put into it. Again, all of these old teachings,
yeah,
but you're saying what I also believe, and I hope our listeners understand, is just putting that one little foot in front of the other, taking that one little different step, word, action, whatever it looks like, can start the process of really monumental change.
absolutely. And if you were to fall off the improvement wagon, right? Don't beat yourself up, right? Forgive yourself. Like, just look at it. What happened, right? Why did I fall off the wagon? Great. Now that I know that, what do I need to do to course correct that so I can get back on and that situation doesn't happen again, right? Because like I said, it takes around 66 days on the average to make it a habit becomes automatic. But if you went into it like 30 days and you jump off, don't get mad. Don't beat up yourself, right? Because the 30 days have done some change. So now it's going to be going 30 to 40 or 40 to 45. But just like we have this saying about going to the gym to do your physical fitness, similar to that, you're doing your mental fitness as well. And that needs to be over time. It might not be visible immediately, just like you don't get a muscle immediately after you go do push-ups and things like that, but it does build up and eventually it becomes automatic.
Yourself, your body is responding to that, and in this case it's your brain.
Exactly.
I'm going to switch subjects if that's okay.
Okay.
And ask you a little bit about your special forces, your work with the veterans. What brought you there, and what work specifically do you do with them to help them transition? I think I read transition into their next career, right?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. Well, I always have a soft spot for veterans because my dad was a police officer and my brother was in the military as well. And it just makes me sad that we don't really have that many good resources for veterans that are coming back, transitioning to the second career, or coming back into corporate world, society in general. So I found this organization called the Honor Foundation that just works with Navy SEALs and special operation officers. And the reason why this organization was formed was they didn't have anything for Navy SEALs or special operators. So that's why they were formed. Now they've been around for like at least 7-8 years, and I've been working with them for a long time as well. And essentially, what we do is there's a 12-week program that they go through, and we transition them based on what they did there and connecting the dots and what they did in the military to the corporate speak. And that includes things like, coming up with your brand, your pitch, resumes, interviewing skills, the whole 9 yards. And the 12 weeks, we kind of break it up into 4-4-4. The first 4 weeks is all about discovering your why, right? And it's a funny thing when you go through that. It's like, what are you talking about? What's my why? My why is for the country. It's like, great, you did all that. We thank you for your service. Yeah. Now it's you, right? You're coming into the corporate world. What do you want to do? What are the lessons learned that you got from that experience? What are some of the superpowers from that now you want to use in your corporate world, right? Now that you're home with your spouse and your family, what do you want to do on the personal front? Because now you're not being launched everywhere, right? Deployed here, deployed there, and things like that. What do you want to do there? And then once we go through the why, then we give them the different skill set and the techniques and different toolkits and your toolbox that they can put in to be the best version of themselves.
I can see such value in that. Because yes, I thank every military person out there for doing the hard stuff so that I don't have to and my family doesn't have to, right? What that requires of them is learning to take orders and obeying those orders and doing it to the best of their ability. Then you come back into the real world, there's nobody giving orders, and you get to think of you get to think about yourself and become more self-aware, which is going to be critically important in the corporate environment. Why didn't they have any program for special forces? And I'm assuming that means they had something for transitioning military, but just not your higher performing, higher level military.
Yeah, maybe they thought they were elite. They could fend for themselves. I have no idea, But it's interesting. You mentioned something there about taking orders and things like that. And I go through them and they're like fish out of water. It's like, there's no way, because I've been in the military for 20 years or 25 years. How am I going to compete with all these people who have all these credentials and things like that? And I look at them, are you kidding me? You're the type of person that I want to hire because your core values are still strong. Those are the things that I can train you on, right? All the technical skills, I can train you on that, right? What you have for the workforce is the other way around, right? But I need to work on the soft skills and the core values. So trying to tell them that it's like the core values is a lot of, assets to that, a lot of advantage to that. Make sure you use that to your strength and then amplify that as part of your interviewing skill, right? Yes, the job might be difficult, but I have good core values in terms of work habits and resilience and things like that, right? Because you're the one who's running towards the fire.
Right.
Right, to get
which is what
done.
Leadership is most of the time.
Exactly. And on the flip side, I also tell them that you're going to get frustrated as well. Because when certain things are not done right, and when you go question them, why are we doing this way? You might get an answer because that's the way we've always done it. It's going to drive you crazy. So how do you adapt to that? How do you counter that and things like that? So
well, if they were a leader in the military, they might also get someone that says, I don't agree with you. And after 20 years of, these are the rules and the regs and the policies and procedures of military, and this is how we do it. Do you find that some of them struggle with that?
Oh yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, because that's how they were trained, right?
Mhm.
And you're conditioned. So you need to like uncondition that as well and tell them this is what you need to do. Sometimes you have to play the rules, right? This is the rule of the game. But as long as you're not compromising your core values, that's the important thing.
Right.
Just as they have the right to fire you, you have the right to fire them, right? So you need to be confident with your skills, and that's what we're going to give you. What do you need to do to accentuate your skills and also show up your skills that you might be lacking, whether it's the credentials or whether it's certificate or whatever.
I'm really glad you shared that story, because what that highlights for me, and hopefully our listeners, is fear and doubt and uncertainty and self-judgment exist in every single solitary human being. You
Absolutely.
are elite in the military, and the rest of us looking on go, there is no way I could compete with that person because what they had to go through and learn to do this. Yet here they are saying, well, I've been in the military 20 years. I'm not going to make it in corporate. What would you say to our listeners about that condition we all have, that judge or judges that kind of play around in our minds and come at us at the worst times?
Yeah, the first step is to recognize it. And how do you recognize that, right? Because everybody has blind spot. So it goes back to the vulnerability and seeking feedback. Like one of the simple skills that I provide during my coaching as well is something called the start, stop, continue. Forgot who came up with that, right? Let's say you want to improve to be something else, right? What are some of the things that you need to start doing to be that person or to achieve something? That's the start part. And what are some of the behaviors or action that you're doing right now that are detrimental to that final goal or the final version of what you want to be? So you want to stop that. And what are some of the things that you're doing that is working towards your final path? That's the continue. So start, stop, continue. And I always have the leader tell, you start that with your team, with your direct team. Tell them, you know what, Beth, I think I've noticed these are some of the things I need to start doing in order to be a better leader. And I've noticed that these are some of the things that I should stop doing. And by the way, I think these are some of the things I should continue doing. What do you think? Just kind of blend it into the conversation rather than going stop, stop, continue. And then once they see that the leader is willing to do that, guess what? They'll open up as well. And they'll incorporate that. Again, leading by example.
It's the exact opposite of the way I remember being taught early on in the corporate career. And I love it because that's just at its base, it is a human connecting with another human to lead by example, to influence and bring them along your vision and your path, right? It's such a thing of beauty. We switch subjects, but we're also talking about that, the cognitive wiring and then rewiring. How would our world look different in 10 to 20 years if we were to start working with our kids using those bite-sized steps like you were talking about earlier? Would our military folks come out with more confidence about the corporate world? Would the corporate leaders be more vulnerable and share themselves at the table and not be worried people taking advantage? I mean, what would it look like for you?
That's my hope, because that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write that book, because the tagline is like, how can we be exemplary citizens, right? During COVID and during the last presidential era, I don't want to get into politics, there was so much of this, one group versus the other group. It's like, my God, we're better than this. What's going on? So this was basically, the book was also like a gift to society. It's like, look within, right? At the end of the day, we're all God's children. We're all born perfect. It's like, why can't we all get along? It's like one Saturday night, like tag it, like, why can't we just get along? Right? So, again, let's start young, right? And as the parents are doing that, guess what? As they're modeling those behaviors, they themselves improve, right? So it's like a double-edged sword. I did that on purpose, right? And I also did the book to be more academic on purpose as well, with the science and all that. So,
well, I know that I will be picking up a copy of that very soon myself. Just a couple more questions before we wrap. What do you think or believe that are the top 1 to 3 things that hold us all back as adults and even as kids from stepping into ourselves to the person and to the leader that we're supposed to be?
I think the biggest thing would be the fear of success and the fear of failure. It's weird, right? The both fear of success and the fear of failure. And a lot of it has to do with the conditioning as well, right? We've seen a role model or we've seen someone in our family that have gone through that, right? So I would say the fear is the number one. So part of that is, okay, if that fear exists, how can we change that to become less fearful? And how do you tap into your strength? right? So one of the steps that I do working with my individuals as well, understanding what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths. And an easy example is the strength is things that comes to you naturally.
Yep.
A weakness would be something that you're putting off, you don't want to do, you're fearful of doing, and things like that. So attacking that up front. Why is that? Again, go back to the root cause. Why are you fearful of that? Why are you fearful of that? Right. And understanding that and then giving them the strategies to overcome that. And actually giving them actual examples on how other people have overcome that adversity. Because one of the things that I work with military personnel as well, this might sound like a play word, but I tell them, let's use your PTSD in terms of a post-traumatic stress to be your post-traumatic strength, right? Use that to your advantage, right? Richard Branson, he has some disability. He's like one of the richest men in the world, right? And Elon Musk, all these guys have used that to the advantage. So let's turn that, let that not be that excuse. Let that be your strength, right?
Love
So
it.
yeah.
I love that. What is your personal mission, Dr. Ravi, as you continue to coach and train and guide people through cognitive wiring and rewiring, overcoming our limitations? What do you want to affect, or what change do you want to affect on the world?
That people be more compassionate. If we just have an ounce of compassion, an additional ounce of compassion throughout, I think this world will be such a better place, right? It's not always about you, right? What do you want your dash to be from the time you were born to the time you leave this earth, right? Make a difference, because we're all here for a reason, right? And let's figure out what that reason is, what your dash needs to be, and make a difference. And my biggest philosophy is always pay it forward. Whoever I work with, now that you got this, I've equipped you with this strategy or whatever, how can you go impact somebody else who was like you, right? And pay it forward. And if every single person can do that, this place will be such a better place to be in.
And you are going to have an incredible impact. I absolutely believe that. Is it oversimplifying, Dr. Ravi, to say that when we're seeking that compassion from others, we're seeking understanding from others, we're seeking empathy from others, that we attract what we put out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the end of the day, we are all energy, right? Even when I'm giving a workshop or when I'm making a speaking engagement, things like that, I work the room. The energy is important, because if you said you want to be successful, I want to be a multimillionaire, I want to do that, but your actions and your body language doesn't say that, guess what? You're not going to achieve it. So the energy is important. So putting out, what do you want to see? I think Gandhi had the best quote, right? Be the change you want to be, be the change you want to see. So same thing. Yeah.
Well, your energy is definitely contagious, and I feel it even through the screen. I've worked with you a little bit in the past, and I happen to know from even that short experience, and now with this interview and this podcast, that a lot of people are going to benefit from working with you. And I hope they do come to you. I hope you guys, if you're needing help in any of the areas that Dr. Ravi talked about today, please look him up. And where can they find you online? And where can we all find a copy of your book? And I believe that's called Hardwiring versus Rewiring: Shaping the Mindset, Skill Set, and Behaviors During Early Childhood Development.
Yes. The best place to go to is my website, which is www.drravirajaratnam.com. And it has all my social media handles there too. It has the link to go get the book. It's in Amazon all over the world. And I've also included all the research that I've done for my book in the website as well. So if you want to get really deep into what cognitive skills means and what are the different development period between 0 to 5, you can also do that. And I also have a complimentary 30-minute coaching session as well, whatever topic you want to talk about, whether it is early childhood development or leadership development or just dealing with kids, whatever. I'm more than happy to speak to you.
Well, and I feel like that 30 minutes would be very, very well spent with you, Dr. Ravi. Thank you again so much for joining us today. And folks, that is it for this episode of Illuminating Leadership. As we heard today, discovering the why seems to be a common theme. And Dr. Ravi has said, get to your root cause and work from there in incremental small steps. And I promise you, and I know he promises you, you will start to affect that positive change and growth in yourself. So again, you guys, thanks for tuning in. Dr. Ravi, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys in the next episode.